I stood there, frozen, my suitcase still clutched in my trembling hand as the door closed in my face. The cheerful Christmas wreath swayed mockingly in the December breeze, its red bow a stark contrast to the cold rejection I'd just received. My wife doesn't want strangers at dinner. My son's words hung in the frosty air between us. Strangers. After carrying him for 9 months, after 38 hours of labor, after 47 years of being his mother, I was a stranger. My name is Martha Wilson, 68 years old, and I had just flown across the country from Boston to San Diego because my son James had finally called after 3 years of painful silence. "We'll see you at Christmas, Mom," he'd promised, his voice bright with what I'd thought was genuine excitement. For weeks, I'd lived on that promise, marking off days on my calendar, shopping for gifts for grandchildren whose faces I knew only from rare social media photos I'd managed to glimpse. The airport had been absolute chaos, a 5-hour delay due to winter storms. I'd sat there, clutching my purse, refusing to leave even to use the restroom for fear of missing an announcement. No food, just weak coffee and anticipation. When we finally boarded at 9 p.m., I couldn't sleep a wink, imagining the reunion, rehearsing what I'd say, how I wouldn't cry, how I'd be perfect and pleasant and not say anything that might upset Caroline, my daughter-in-law. Caroline. From the moment James introduced us, I'd seen something calculating behind those perfectly made-up eyes. Always immaculate, always watching, measuring everything and everyone for their value to her. After the wedding, the calls from James grew less frequent, then stopped altogether. Christmas cards returned unopened, birthday messages left unanswered. But this year was different. This year, he'd called. This year, I'd believed. The taxi had dropped me off at 11:43 p.m. I remember checking my watch, thinking it was late, but they'd be waiting up. The porch light was on. Through the window, I could see their magnificent Christmas tree, glittering with ornaments that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Music played softly inside. Silent night. Oh, the bitter irony. I'd barely pressed the doorbell when it swung open. James stood there, not with open arms, but with a stricken look. Behind him, Caroline, arms crossed, lips tight, wearing what looked like an expensive cocktail dress, as if they'd been entertaining. Real guests, not strangers like me. "Mom," he'd said, shifting uncomfortably. "You're late. We weren't sure you were coming anymore." "The storm," I began, but Caroline cut me off. "We've already had dinner. The kids are in bed." Her voice was ice, sharp enough to cut glass. I nodded, forcing a smile. "That's okay. I'm just happy to be here." Then James looked back at Caroline, who gave him the slightest nod, a signal I recognized immediately. A puppeteer pulling strings. He turned to me, his face a mask I couldn't read. "My son, yet not my son. Look, Mom, there's been a misunderstanding. We were expecting you for dinner, not to stay. Caroline doesn't want strangers at our family Christmas." I felt my heart crack, but held my face still. "James," I whispered, "I'm your mother." "It's been 3 years, Mom," he said, as if that explained everything. Things change. People change. Then the door closed. Just like that. No goodbye, no sorry, no Merry Christmas. I stood there, light snow beginning to dust my shoulders, wondering what I'd done to deserve this, what terrible crime I'd committed as a mother that warranted such cruelty. The memory of James as a little boy flashed through my mind, how he used to run to me with treasures he'd found, how I'd worked 3 jobs after his father died to ensure he had everything he needed, how I'd sat up nights helping him with college applications. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of Caroline's triumphant smile as she turned away. But just before, I saw something else. She was looking at a magazine, open to a page featuring Harrington House, that magnificent historical mansion on the hill that the elite of San Diego coveted so desperately. The one Caroline had mentioned in the few conversations we'd had, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "Whoever owns that house owns this town," she'd once said. If only she knew. I don't know how long I stood there, my tears turning cold on my cheeks. But eventually, I set my suitcase down and took out a pen and the small notepad I always carry. My hands shook as I wrote, but my mind was suddenly crystalline clear. Sometimes, when you have nothing left to lose, the truth flows easily. When I finished, I folded the note carefully and walked to their mailbox. I slipped it inside, picked up my suitcase, and called another taxi. 3 days later, As I sat in my small but elegant apartment back in Boston, my phone began to ring, then ring again, and again. Text messages flooding in, voicemails filling up. I watched the phone vibrate across my antique writing desk, the desk where I'd signed the papers just last month, papers that would change everything. I let it ring, because sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't revenge, it's truth. If you're captivated by Martha's story of betrayal and hidden power, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. What did Martha write in that note? What secrets does this seemingly ordinary mother hold? The answers will shock you. For 3 days, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. James's name flashed on the screen so often I considered blocking him. 47 calls, 63 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Mom, please call me. We need to talk. What did you mean in your note? Mom, this is serious. Please, Mom, I'm begging you. I watched snow fall outside my window, remembering how James used to build snowmen with me, his little hands red with cold, but his face alight with joy. That child was gone now, replaced by a man who called his mother a stranger. On the 4th day, at precisely 9 a.m., I finally answered. Martha Wilson speaking. My voice was steady, practiced, the voice I'd used in boardrooms for decades before my retirement. Mom! James sounded breathless, as if he'd been running. Thank God! I've been trying to reach you for days. Have you? I kept my tone light, conversational. I've been rather busy. Mom, your note. Is it true? All of it? I smiled to myself, though there was no joy in it. Every word, James. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of revelations. You own Harrington House? His voice was barely above a whisper. The one Caroline's been trying to get us invited to for years? The one that never goes on the market? I purchased it through my holding company in 1987, I said simply. Your father and I had planned to retire there. After he died, I couldn't bear to live in it, but I couldn't sell it either. Sentimental value, I suppose. And the trust fund? $12 million? Your grandfather was a prudent man. He set it up to mature on your 48th birthday. That's next month, isn't it? January 15th? I heard what sounded like a glass breaking in the background. Is Caroline listening? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Yes, James admitted. You're on speaker. Hello, Caroline, I said pleasantly. I assume you've read my note? Her voice came through, tight and controlled, but I could hear the rage simmering beneath. Martha, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. James and I would love for you to come back and spend Christmas with us. The children have been asking about their grandmother. I nearly laughed. Children who had never met me asking about me? The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. That's very kind, I replied, but I'm afraid I have other plans. What other plans? James asked. Mom, please, we need to talk about this face to face. About what exactly, James? About how you let your wife call me a stranger? Or about how she's been systematically sabotaging your career to keep you dependent on her family connections? Another silence, heavier than the first. What are you talking about? His voice had changed, confusion replacing desperation. The promotion at Westridge Partners last spring, the one you were passed over for. Did you know you were actually the board's first choice? Did you know Caroline met privately with Richard Westridge and convinced him you weren't ready? I have the recording, James. Would you like to hear it? I heard movement, muffled voices, the sound of a door closing. When James spoke again, Caroline was clearly no longer in the room. Mom, this can't be true. Caroline wouldn't do that. Just like she wouldn't intercept my letters, my birthday cards to the children, the Christmas presents I sent every year. I kept my voice gentle. This wasn't about hurting my son. It was about opening his eyes. She said you never sent anything. I have the tracking confirmations, James. Everything was delivered and signed for. I paused. By Caroline. His breathing had grown ragged. I could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he always did when distressed. Why are you telling me this now? He finally asked. After all this time? The question struck me like a physical blow. Why now, indeed? Because I'd been a coward? Because I'd been afraid of losing him completely? Because, I said slowly, I believed that one day you would remember who you were, who we were. I kept hoping, James, until 3 nights ago when you closed the door. Mom, His voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm not looking for apologies, James. But I am the trustee of your grandfather's estate. I have certain responsibilities. The terms are clear. The beneficiary must demonstrate sound financial judgment. If I determine that the money would be subject to undue influence or mismanagement, I have the power to redirect it to charitable causes. You wouldn't do that, he said, but uncertainty colored his words. Wouldn't I? 3 days ago, you called me a stranger. Why would a stranger leave you millions of dollars? The truth hung between us, sharp, undeniable. What do you want me to do? He finally asked. That's entirely up to you, James. But know this. I have a meeting with my lawyers on December 26th, the day after Christmas. Whatever decisions you make between now and then will determine my decisions thereafter. You're blackmailing me? Hurt and disbelief warred in his voice. I'm giving you a choice, I corrected gently. Which is more than you gave me when you shut that door. I heard a commotion in the background. Caroline's voice growing louder, demanding to know what I was saying. I should go, James said hurriedly. Yes, you should, I agreed. You have a lot to think about. Just before he hung up, I added, Oh, and James, the passcode to the email account mentioned in my note is your birth date. Everything is there. The recordings, the documents, the proof, all of it. The truth doesn't ask to be believed. It only asks to be seen. After I hung up, I sat motionless, staring at the phone. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the photograph on my desk. James at his college graduation, beaming with pride, his arm around my shoulders. The last time I truly recognized my son. The door to my apartment opened, and Eleanor, my oldest friend, stepped in with grocery bags. You finally talked to him? She asked, setting the bags down. I nodded, unable to speak. And? She prompted, sitting beside me. And now we wait, I whispered, to see if my son still exists inside the man Caroline created. Eleanor squeezed my hand. He does, Martha. He's in there. And you just threw a grenade into the fortress keeping him prisoner. That night, I dreamed of Harrington House, its sweeping staircases, its garden views, the life I might have had there with my husband, the Christmases we might have shared with our son and his children. Dreams of what never was, what might yet be. My phone pinged at 3:17 a.m. A text from James. I opened the email. We need to talk. I'm coming to Boston. The Boston winter welcomed James with a blizzard. His flight was nearly diverted, but somehow he made it. I watched from my window as the taxi pulled up, as my son stepped out into the swirling snow, looking up at my building with uncertainty written across his face. I'd chosen this apartment specifically for its unassuming exterior. A modest brick building in Back Bay, nothing that would suggest its residents might include someone who controlled millions in assets. Nothing that would hint that apartment 4B housed the anonymous owner of Harrington House, the crown jewel of San Diego real estate. The buzzer rang. I pressed the intercom. 4th floor, I said simply, then released the door. Those 3 minutes it took him to climb the stairs were an eternity. I smoothed my cardigan, touched my silver hair, wondering if he would see the changes time had etched into my face, or if he would see only the stranger Caroline had convinced him I was. The knock, when it came, was hesitant. 3 soft taps. I opened the door to find my son looking more haggard than I'd ever seen him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His usually immaculate hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. He'd lost weight since Christmas Eve. Mom, he said, and the words seemed to catch in his throat. James, I responded, stepping aside. Come in. He entered slowly, eyes taking in my home, a place he'd never visited. His gaze lingered on the photographs arranged on the bookshelf, most of him at various ages. The trophies he'd won in high school, the framed article about his first job at Westridge Partners. You've been following my career, he said quietly. Did you think I wouldn't? I gestured to the sofa. Sit, please. You look exhausted. He sank down, dropping his head into his hands. I don't even know where to begin. I settled in the armchair across from him, folding my hands in my lap. The beginning is usually a good place. He looked up, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to come to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. The recordings, he said. Caroline, she really did all those things? Yes. She told Richard Westridge I wasn't ready for the promotion. She intercepted your letters, your gifts. Yes, his voice faltered. She's been lying to me for our entire marriage. I believe so. Yes. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Why didn't you tell me? Years ago, when it started happening. Why didn't you fight harder to reach me? The question pierced me like a shard of ice. I'd asked myself the same thing countless times. At first, I didn't know, I admitted. I thought perhaps you were busy, building your new life. Then I suspected, but I had no proof. By the time I obtained the evidence, you seemed happy, James. Or at least I convinced myself you were. Happy? He gave a bitter laugh. Do you know what my life has been like? The constant pressure from Caroline to climb the social ladder, to make more money, to get invited to the right parties, the way she criticizes everything I do, everything I am. No, I said softly.